We've got brand new March Dynasty Startup ADP for you. That and much more on today's episode of Locked On Dynasty.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Matt Williamson and Ryan McDowell.
Thanks for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Welcome to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan McDowell. You can follow me on Twitter at RyanMC23. Joining me as always is Matt Williamson. Find Matt on Twitter at WilliamsonNFL. How's it going today, Matt?
It's good, man. How are you? Things are heating up around the league right now.
They are. We had an interesting couple of days to start the week with the tags. A couple of deals got done.
Mm-hmm.
But Matt, I was really looking forward to free agency this year, and so many others were. I looked at the list of what's left after the tags, after those couple quarterback deals got done. It's pretty ugly when you talk about the top free agents left. What
it is.
I mean, the wide receiver's been bad, but I looked at the top guys. Garoppolo, I think, is probably the top free agent quarterback. Myers and Juju at wide receiver. Right. Yeah, I mean running back. Yeah, Schultz at tight end.
Yeah,
running back Sanders, Montgomery.
Yeah, are any of them franchise-changing type players? Not really, for fantasy purposes. Yeah, I mean, some of the best guys are like Hargrave and Orlando Brown, and, it's fine. But, and some guys are getting cut, the Robert Woods. I mean, not that that's super exciting, but no, I hear you. It's a little bit underwhelming of a free agency class, but I do think some quarterbacks could move. Aaron Rodgers, obviously, is still in the news, and Lamar and those guys. So it'll be fun.
That is true. We had kind of similar thoughts last year with just an average at best free agent class, and we had Russell Wilson traded and Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill. So sounds like Rodgers could move. Sounds like DeAndre Hopkins could move. So yeah, maybe that'll give us some excitement with some trades.
Good point.
Matt, we've got some brand new startup ADP. This is March data. It is post-combine, although this startup data probably isn't affected too much by the NFL combine. We're just going to look at the first round today, and really I want to focus on the bottom end, the bottom half of the first round. Mm-hmm. The top 5 players, Matt, are the exact same as last month. Wow. We talked about them then, slightly different order, but we still have Justin Jefferson at 101. He was actually the first overall pick in all of those mock drafts. Jamar Chase is 2. Obvious and no surprise there. 3 and 4 flip-flop. Last month it was CeeDee Lamb and then A.J. Brown. Now it's back to A.J. Brown, then Lamb at 4. And the 5th overall player, just as he was last month, is Bijan Robinson, also the first running back selected. So those 5 seem to be pretty well locked in when you look at these one quarterback leagues. So let's move past those. You had quick
question
comments,
for you.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, just a couple little things. I mean, I'm kind of picking nits here, but I'm a little shocked that AJ Brown and Lamb are that close. I prefer Brown, 9 out of 10 times. I mean, pretty consistently, and I probably would have Bijan over Lamb. I know this is, it's probably not even worth talking about, but do you definitely have Jefferson over Chase? I might not.
There's probably a little bit of recency bias with the season that Jefferson put up, that he's been not only the 101, but the essentially the unanimous 101 for 2 months running now. I think I pointed it out here last month. Maybe it was maybe I just stuck that in one of my articles, but we've got to go back to December of 2020, I believe, before you, or maybe it was 2021, before you find a consensus 101 in our ADP. So basically we went, it was 21. We went basically a full year before we had that again with Jefferson. Now he's done it 2 months in a row. So, I mean, to me, they're still very close. We always say we're happy to have either one. Yeah. Take your pick. Either one of those guys is fine, which is true. But I mean, if you've got the 101 in a startup, you're going to have to make the decision. I would take Jefferson, but okay. I agree with you. It's definitely close.
Yeah, to me, it's like a flat out coin flip.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. Matt, I want to get to, like I said, the back half of the draft here, and we'll name all these names very soon and tell you the order here. But when you're dealing with a teardrop like this, like we've got these top 5 guys, and it's probably more like 1 and 2, and then 3, 4, 5 are a second tier. Matt, if you're doing a startup now and you have that 6th pick, you're probably not feeling great. What direction would you be going here? It might be a specific player, might be a trade down if that were an option. What's your move if you've got the 106 pick in a single quarterback startup?
Maybe I'm a little different than you, because I definitely would prefer the top 5 over 6, and not just for obvious reasons because they're earlier, because I do think those 5 are different than the others. Yeah, but I think Taylor, who's 6, is clearly my 6. Like, I'd be more worried if I was a 7. You know what I mean?
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So Jonathan Taylor is the 106. I believe he also was held that same spot last month. So no change there. I disagree, Matt. I'm not drafting Jonathan Taylor in the first round at all.
Okay.
And there's honestly not many running backs I would take in the first round.
That was my next question. Would you take Hall or McCaffrey or Gibbs or anyone?
Gibbs. Whoa, you throwing Gibbs in there.
I know I got a little aggressive. I was trying to
think. You stunned me there for a second. I would take Bijan. Obviously, I think he belongs in the first round. And I think even if you don't want to build around running backs, like is the case with me and many others, Bijan's going to have that trade value. So if you're sitting at 4, 5, 6, you've got to take Bijan, just, if for no other reason than to be able to flip him for a wide receiver you like and much more. And obviously I don't think it would be a bad thing to keep him either. Hall would be my RB2, and he would be the only other back I would consider in the first round. Other than that, it's going to be wide receiver after wide receiver, which is mostly what we see here. So interesting that you feel confident with JT at 6 still, and then you see a teardrop after Taylor at 6.
You almost said exactly what I was about to say, but about McCaffrey, not Taylor. Like, there's no way if I'm sitting there at 7, I'm taking McCaffrey. I mean, there's just no way. I might consider Hall. I think Hall and Taylor are neck and neck, but I can't use a first round pick on Christian McCaffrey at his age.
No, I wouldn't either. Yeah. I think the ADP is understandable, but I'm not making that pick. CMC is the 7th overall player here, right behind Taylor. That makes him the RB3, and we've got after 4 wide receivers to start the data set, we've got 3 running backs in a row. That's broken by another string of wide receivers. And you mentioned some concerns or some thoughts on CeeDee Lamb, that maybe he's a little overvalued at 4 overall. I agree with that. I would put Lamb with these next 4 wide receivers that we're going to name as young, high upside wide receivers, but I don't think we should really see a value gap between him and the rest of these. And honestly, I would say the same thing about AJ Brown. So my second wide receiver tier after Chase and Jefferson would include Brown and Lamb, along with these players. Chris Olave is 8. Actually, Olave and Jalen Waddle have the same exact ADP of 9.5. So they hold the 8 and 9 spots. Garrett Wilson is next. Amon-Ra St. Brown is next after that. So that's 4 wide receivers: Olave, Waddle, Wilson, and St. Brown. I'm lumping those 4 in with AJB and CeeDee Lamb. And that's kind of what my wide receiver tier looks like.
So 2 things I have to add to that, well, maybe 3, is I would take Wilson of that clump first because I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be his quarterback. I really do. So
Okay.
that gives him the bump over Olave and Waddle. I love St. Brown, but he just doesn't scream first round wide receiver to me. Yeah, I mean, he's just a little unassuming. I really think he's a good player, but I'm not saying there's anybody out there to take over him that's not listed. It's just I just don't do jumping jacks with that. With my first building block of my team. And the way you said that, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but it made it sound like if you're sitting at 103 and can't get out, you're taking Bijan.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
I would certainly try to trade down because
Sure.
Wilson and Olave are probably my favorite picks after that top 5.
Understandable.
And as I said, I do really put them in the tier with Brown and Lamb. So if I can't trade down, I think maybe you're right. Maybe I take Bijan, and again, I'm going to have plenty of trade options. Or if he's just my one running back, and then really hammer wide receivers from there on. That would be a solid team building strategy as well. I get your concerns on St. Brown. I mean, seems to lack the big play upside. Obviously doesn't have the draft capital of the other guys we mentioned that were for the most part first round NFL draft picks. So I get that. I think he belongs here. I mean, he's been as productive as almost anybody the past couple of years, especially among that group of young wideouts. Matt, we've talked too long about this. We've got a rookie to talk about. Oh, and by the way, Bryce Hall, 12 overall. That finishes out that first round. Yeah. When we come back, though, Matt, we're going to talk about the player who might be the top overall pick in the NFL draft. We'll do that right after this break.
Everyone, the midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is absolutely the perfect time to download FanDuel, which is America's #1 sportsbook. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use, trust me. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers to threes drained. You can bet on player points, rebounds, assists. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss a chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Matt, I mentioned that the player we're talking about today could be the top overall pick. I guess maybe I should have said that about Anthony Richardson when we spoke about him a couple days ago, because the odds continue to go in his favor that he could actually be the top overall player drafted. But for now, I think this guy is the guy that is the favorite to be that top pick. It's Agreed. Bryce Young. No surprise. You probably figured that out by now. Bryce Young, of course, the quarterback from Alabama. Usually we brush by these measurements and just kind of spit them out and move on. But I think we better slow down here a little bit, Matt. Measured in at 5'10", 204 pounds. There was a lot of concern about what those numbers would be. Of course, he was listed, I believe, at 6 foot and 210 or somewhere around that. And everyone knew that was not happening. He was clearly, even based on some pictures that had been kind of floating around Twitter and floating around the internet, it was obvious that he was not 6 feet tall. But ultimately, I think 5'10" and being over 200 pounds, I think he kind of came out as one of the winners of the combine, even though he wasn't really all that active in the drills or on the field. What did you think about that?
Yes, because you can put it on paper. It's set in stone. He was over 200 pounds at his combine. Great. I just, he walked right by me and I was a little alarmed how small he was. And I think he's got an inflated weight. I mean, I don't know this for a fact. I think he's 5'10", 190. When he gets to camp next year or rookie mini camp, or I think that's what he plays at. And that's very, very little.
It is funny that these players get measured at the combine in February or March, before they're drafted. And then essentially for the rest of their career, those are the heights and weights that are
right.
That are used and associated with these players. And it's obvious that like the rest of us, players gain and lose weight all the time, but we stick with those combine numbers for whatever reason. So you're right, because of that. And maybe maybe he loaded up on the donuts or on the protein as the combine neared, but that 204 number looks pretty nice. Sounds like you don't quite believe it though.
Not as what he's going to play at. I mean, I believe he was 204 pounds that day in Indianapolis. And like you said, I mean, like when I reference guys, like for example, the Steelers signed someone, I always go back to their combine and I reference their height because the weight is,
you trust the height.
The height hasn't changed. I don't know about the weight. I mean, I don't know if he'll be 204 pounds on a football field ever again.
Yeah, that's fair. Of course, Bryce Young was a 5-star recruit, ended up at Alabama, didn't play much his freshman year, got a little bit of game action, but really blew up as a sophomore. That was the 2021 season. And Matt, I mean, we knew how impressive Bryce Young was, leading his team to the playoffs, nearly winning a title. But these numbers are just crazy. Over 4,800 passing yards and 47 touchdowns, just 7 interceptions on the season. That 47-7 ratio is looking pretty nice. We knew those numbers had to drop. He also lost really almost all of his top pass catchers after his sophomore season. But still solid numbers this past year, over 3,300 yards, 32 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. So the production is certainly there. What's your kind of overall take? I mean, you talked about his size. If you can kind of take that out of your analysis and what's your thoughts on Young's game?
Just like one sentence on his size, though. I'm not worried about him seeing the field and all that. I'm worried about his durability. I mean, I just don't. 17 plus games, including preseason, postseason, all those things. I'm just worried about his durability. Can he handle it week after week after week, year after year, not being able to see the field? That being said, he's a tremendous prospect. Other than that, I mean, he really is. He throws the football extremely well. They often talk about how by Tuesday, he has the game plan down pat and is coming to the coaches with suggestions and all that type of thing is phenomenal. I mean, he's a good athlete, but he doesn't rely on it. Tough as can be, really good passer, experience in big games, which I think, carries a lot of weight as well. And excuse me, one thing I used to say about Aaron Rodgers, and now I'm saying about Pat Mahomes, and I'm not saying he's gonna be as good as those guys, but
sure,
compared to all-time greats, I always said Rodgers has as good a highlight tape as anyone in the Hall of Fame. And his low-light tape, his bad plays, are as good as anyone in the Hall of Fame. Like, this guy doesn't turn the ball over either. Like, there's not many bad plays, and his highlights are really high, and his lows are very high too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, you watch Young play, and it's hard not to be impressed. You kind of hinted at it a little bit there, but so many of the what would probably be considered strengths and are mentioned if you look and listen to some of the top scouts in the game are really those intangibles: his leadership, his football IQ. I really hesitate to even use this word because it's kind of just become a joke at this point, but he has shown that he's a clutch athlete. He can get it done, in crunch time when his team needs him. He, the majority of the time, was able to make a big play. And I don't think that's just a coincidence. I think that's, that's kind of part of his makeup. He does have speed, didn't run the ball a ton. I think, if you didn't watch college football much, if you are just catching up on these prospects, even the top prospects like Young, maybe you expected him to to be able or to run a lot more than he did, but that hasn't really been the case. We kind of said the same thing with CJ Stroud. I don't, just because these are, or just because Young is a smaller player and an athletic player, he doesn't run the ball a ton.
No.
I think it's possible, but we can't assume that's going to be part of his game.
And you don't want him getting hit downfield either. So I'm not counting on a lot of
especially at that frame.
Right.
Any other strengths with Bryce Young?
Field vision, creativity, different arm angles. That we're seeing that more and more across the league. The Mahomes experience, and I'm not comparing him to Mahomes, but just really sees the field extremely well. So yeah, I mean, he does a lot of good stuff.
Weaknesses. I mean, it's really just the size, which is that's a good place to be. If that's the main question we have about a player, about a quarterback, it's a concern. It's an understandable concern, but that's really it. I mean, it doesn't have the biggest arm, the most arm strength. I would say probably just average, but I don't think that's a deal breaker by any means.
Right,
Matt, we haven't talked specifically rankings yet here. So comparing, we'll leave Richardson and Levis out of it for now, but just comparing Stroud and Young from an NFL standpoint, not even dynasty or fantasy.
Yeah.
Who do you think's the better quarterback prospect?
I think Young. Boy, I love the way Stroud threw the ball at the combine, though. And the last couple tastes of Stroud we've seen, combine, the game against Georgia has been his best stuff. Not that his other stuff was bad.
Yeah.
I think Stroud is the safest prospect of these quarterbacks. And, I'd be shocked if he busts, where I can see a path where the other three absolutely could. And with Young would be inability to stay on the field. So he's a little bit more of a dice roll for me, but I think I would roll the dice with Young. That goes against my nature, though, just taking little quarterbacks. It hurts my soul a little bit, but I do think he has a chance to be really, really good. And some of it might, be where I live. If I was the Bears, I'd rather maybe have Stroud or even the other two. But if I'm Houston or Tennessee or Tampa, I'm talking about geography, domes, things like that. I'm a lot more comfortable with Young.
Okay. All right. Matt, when we come back, we'll talk about dynasty value and potential landing spots in the NFL. Thanks for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez provide in-depth coverage of the biggest NFL draft prospects with deep dives into the sleepers and hidden gems that can change your favorite NFL franchise. Find Locked On NFL Draft wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. All right, Matt, let's finish up here our conversation about Bryce Young. Looking at the dynasty rankings over at DLF, he is the third ranked player overall in our Superflex rookie rankings. He's the quarterback too, so he is behind Stroud there. But if you shift over to,
it's not Richardson though. He's ahead of
not yet.
Not yet. It's coming.
I mentioned that yesterday. We'll have that post combine rookie ADP very soon. And yeah, I'm with you. I'm interested to see if Anthony Richardson has overtaken Stroud or Young, or maybe even both. Certainly in that mix. Rookie ADP, again, this is also pre-combine Superflex ADP. Young is second overall there, and he's the first quarterback. So even the mock drafters, the rankers from DLF are torn on Stroud versus Young. If you look over at startup ADP, Young is the quarterback 15. I believe he's just behind CJ Stroud in that data set. Both of those guys,
they're really neck and neck, huh?
Very close, and both already close to that quarterback one range. So no real surprise there.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick look at some expert mock drafts, and this won't take long because the numbers are all very all very similar. Mel Kiper has Bryce Young first overall to Houston. And of course, a lot of these In fact, most of these draft projections do involve a trade. We've got obviously the Bears sitting at 1 right now, and most people expect them to trade that pick. Matt Miller, also first overall. He thinks the Colts are going to be the team to trade up. Daniel Jeremiah, second overall to Houston. That's where they sit right now. Dane Brugler, same thing, second to Houston. Lance Zierlein, Danny Kelly agree with that as well. They both have Bryce Young second to Houston, and McShay agreed with his partner Matt Miller first overall to Indianapolis. So we've got multiple Houston projections, multiple Indianapolis projections. The other teams that you would say are maybe in the mix there, other teams that are in that range have a possible need at quarterback. Las Vegas, 7 overall. You would think they would need to trade up. Detroit, 6 overall. They do have Jared Goff, obviously. So we'll see what route they go. They would need to trade up is the assumption. 8 is Atlanta and 9 is Carolina. So what's your pick here? To me, Houston is that's where I want him to go. That's the one I like the best.
Indy would be attractive as well if they would move up a couple spots. There's a little more infrastructure there than Houston. But Houston has a second first round pick too, which is appealing. Maybe that's a receiver or whatever. I could see all those are about equal landing spots. My only real nuggets here are in those mocks. I think he goes 2 just because their editor said there's no trades in this mock. You know what I mean? Like it's not like Stroud went 1. I mean, I think in all these mocks, it's still Young over Stroud, not by leaps and bounds, but in the mocks, that's the way that all these experts picked. I could absolutely see Carolina being super aggressive, though. I just think they're a very aggressive organization, starting with ownership, that maybe they go all in. Maybe it's even for Lamar, but I bet I could see them going all in and not ending up at 9, instead ending up at 1, 3, something like that, and getting a quarterback, whether that's Young, Stroud, or whomever.
We talked about the Lamar situation, and since you mentioned it, we'll finish up with this. Something that I hadn't thought of when we chatted about it yesterday, I believe, was if a team signs Lamar to that offer sheet, they're agreeing to give up 2 first rounders.
Correct.
But that can be done later in the offseason. It could be done after the NFL draft. Yeah. So if you're one of these teams that we just mentioned, Houston, Indianapolis, Detroit, Las Vegas, Atlanta, Carolina, if you don't get one of the quarterbacks, let's say you miss on all 4, or you don't want Levis or you don't want Richardson, maybe that's plan B is, hey, we'll offer our 2024 and 2025 first, and we'll give this guy 220, 30, 40, 50 million guaranteed. So I know that's a huge price to pay, obviously, but it's also kind of like a plan B if they don't get the rookie in the NFL draft.
Yeah. And so the only way Miami, who's been linked to him, can do it is post-draft because they don't have a first-round pick. So they're not even able to do it now. How about this, though? I've been on like 10 podcasts today, and I keep bringing it up because it really intrigues me. Washington.
Yes.
Their owner might sell the team. He's hated in Washington and across the league. Whether he cares or not, who knows? But if I'm him, what if I just offer Lamar the Watson deal, plus $1, plus 10%, whatever? Lamar's going to say yes. I'm betting the Ravens are going to say no because they already said no to him that way. And all it would cost Washington is a 16th pick, which is late, and next year's first, which you would think is a playoff pick.
I had not thought of it. I kind of like it. I like it a lot. I mean, you're essentially saying that Daniel Snyder really has nothing to lose because the expectation is sooner or later he's moving on.
And real quick, I want to stop you because if you're him, maybe all the Washington fans are like, boy, I hated Daniel Snyder. It's the worst era ever. but he got us Lamar on the way out. Thanks.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? You kind of redeem yourself, and you give the finger to the rest of the league, because now there's 2 guaranteed contracts, and Cincinnati's going, oh no, now Burrow's going to ask for this deal, and how do we refute that?
Wow. I like it. I guess the only question, and I'm not sure about this, is how much of that $250 million guaranteed, how much of that is coming up front as a signing bonus, or, because if it's a $75 million signing bonus or something crazy, you assume that would come out of Snyder's pocket, or, that would hit the pocketbook a little bit more than maybe spreading that out. So that's the only hesitation, but I really like the idea. And you're right. If we talked about that possible collusion yesterday, and if Carolina and Atlanta and Miami and all these other teams that are saying they're not interested, if there is some kind of conspiracy and collusion actually going on, some kind of under the table agreement, well, Daniel Snyder is definitely not involved in that. He is on the outside looking in. So yeah, I like it. We'll see what happens.
And if you're Bezos or whoever, wouldn't you rather buy the Commanders with Lamar than without? I mean, I think the franchise goes up in value, maybe more than the contract. You know what I mean?
And yet another reason for Snyder to make the move. If it's you redo your bathroom on the way before you sell the house. That's a great move.
Throw a coat of paint on everything. It looks better. Hide some warts and puts butts in the seats.
That will do it for today's show. Please make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe to the Locked On Dynasty channel on YouTube. Remember to follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Dynasty. Follow Matt at Williamson NFL. And I'm Ryan, MC23. We'll be back next time with more Locked On Dynasty.